Ok. Un minuto más y comenzamos.
Just one more minute and we're going to be starting out.
Bueno, vamos a empezar para todos y todas
Okay,
que
let's
llegaron
get
a tiempo,
started for everyone that was here on time,
sobre todo nuestros oradores y oradoras que llegaron
particularly
a tiempo,
to
así que
our
muchas gracias.
speakers that were right on time. Thank you so much to every one of them.
Mi nombre es Nati Carfi, soy la directora
I am
ejecutiva de
Nati
la
Karfi
Open
and
Data
I am the
Charter
executive director of Open Data Charter.
y les agradezco muchísimo por estar en
And
esta
I would like to thank
sesión
every one of you for attending
del
this
grupo de
session
implementación,
of the Implementation Working
donde
Group,
vamos a estar conversando
where we're going to be
sobre
discussing
gobernanza de datos y datos abiertos.
data
Sabemos que los
governance
datos
and open
abiertos
data.
son
We are all aware
parte de
that
una
open
política mucho
data
más
are
grande que tiene
part
que
of
ver
a
con la
much
gobernanza
broader
de datos
policy
general
that
y vamos a
entails
conocer
overall data
diferentes trabajos,
governance.
experiencias
And we
desde
are
diferentes
gonna find
perspectivas,
out a little
porque
bit more
tenemos
about different work, different
academia, sociedad civil,
experiences from
gobierno en
different
esta sesión.
perspectives, because we have
Así que estamos muy
representatives from the
agradecidos
academia,
a
civil
todos y
society,
todas
and
que
the
se han
government all
sumado.
present at this session.
Voy
So
a
thank you very
pasarle
much
la
to every one of
palabra
you.
entonces
I'm gonna give the
a
floor
nuestro
without
primer
further ado
orador.
to our first
Emilio Velis es
speaker.
director ejecutivo de la
Emilio
Fundación
Velis is the
Appropedia,
executive
una
director
organización global
of
dedicada a la difusión
Appropedia
de
Foundation, a
soluciones para
global organization
sostenibilidad y la
devoted to
reducción de la pobreza.
sustainability
Es ingeniero
solutions for
industrial
poverty
en El
reductions. He's
Salvador, con una
an
carrera
industrial
enfocada en
engineer
innovación y
in
el
El
diseño de la
Salvador with a
tecnología
career
para el impacto
focused on
social.
innovation
Fue
and
reconocido como
technology
innovador
design
menor de
for
35 por el
innovation.
MIT
He has
Technology Review
been
e
recognized
incluido en
by
una de
the
las listas de
MIT
100
Technology
personas más
Review
innovadoras de
for
América
under
Latina
25,
por Bloomberg
35
en
innovators,
2023.
and also by Bloomberg
Emilio,
in
the floor is yours.
2023.
Si entiendo que te di permisos para poder compartir tu presentación, si no,
I
por favor,
understand that you can
avísame.
already share your slides, but if
Gracias.
you can't,
Todavía
just let me
no
know.
sé en qué idioma tengo que hablar.
Thank you very much. I still
En
don't
el
know what
idioma que vos
language I should
prefieras.
speak in, whatever language you
Hay
prefer.
traducción instantánea de
There
castellano a
is
inglés, así que en
simultaneous
el que te sientas
interpretation
más
into
cómoda.
English, so whatever language you feel more comfortable
Voy a hablar
in.
en español porque,
So I'm going to be speaking
porque,
Spanish
porque es un gusto hablar español.
because it's
Pero
just a pleasure to speak Spanish.
muchas gracias por la invitación.
Thank you
Sé que
so
tengo
much
10
for the
minutos,
invite.
pero
I know
voy
that
a
I've been allotted 10
hacer,
minutes.
tirar un par de ideas
So I'm just going
que puedan
to
servir
raise a
como
couple of
para una
ideas that may
reflexión, así
serve to
como una
spark some
cuestión
discussion.
relacionada a nuestro trabajo en Apropedia. Entonces voy a tirar
They
así
are
como
somehow
la
related to our work in
publicidad sobre lo que
Appropedia,
somos,
and
pero con
so
ese
I'm going
tipo
to be
de
shamelessly
retos que nos
advertising what we
encontramos
do, but I'm
cuando
also going to be sharing
trabajamos
about the
con datos
challenges we face
de
when we work
contenido público.
with
Entonces,
uh,
para darle un
practical
poco de
content
contexto
data.
sobre
So
Apropedia,
just to give
voy
you
a
some
hablar un poco
context
como de
about
la
Appropedia,
motivación
let me tell you a little bit
que
about the
nació hace casi 20
motivation
años.
that led to its
Hablar un poco
creation
de lo
some
que es
20 years
Apropedia y después
ago.
hablar
I'm going to share a little bit
sobre
about our
lo que me
organization.
tiene puesto a discutir conmigo mismo una
And
lectura
I had quite an argument with
sobre esto. Y
myself.
por último, hablar sobre las propuestas que trae
And
Apropedia con
I'm going to
respecto al
wrap up
tema de
with
la
some
contextualización.
proposals of Appropedia
Entonces,
regarding
para comenzar,
decontextualization.
Apropedia
So, to begin with,
nació, yo no sabía, pero el
Appropedia was
fundador
born,
del
well,
campus
I
de
actually
Apropedia en
wasn't aware of
California
that, but the
se inspiró un
foundation
montón en
of
un libro
Appropedia in
que se
California
hizo
was
famoso en los últimos
inspired
años,
largely by
de
a book
Octavia
that
Butler, que
became
se llama La
famous,
parábola del
of a
sembrador,
book
famoso autor,
Butler, the
que es
parable
básicamente
of
la
the
historia
Savior,
del
and that has a lot
afrofuturismo
to do with
histórico
Afrofuturism,
que tiene que
this
ver con
topic.
cambio climático,
It has a
la
lot to do with
destrucción
climate
de las
change and
comunidades como las
the
conocemos.
destruction of communities as we know
Y
them.
ocurre de que dentro de la historia la
And it so happens that
protagonista,
in the
antes
story,
de hacer su
the
viaje a Los
protagonist,
Ángeles a
before embarking
Humboldt, en
on her
California,
trip from Los
toma
Angeles to
tiene
Humboldt
la
in the
dinámica
in
de
Northern
toma, toma
California,
libros, entonces comienza a
she
aprender
takes a couple of
sobre
books from
cosas
her
medicinales,
dad's
sobre
library, some on
plantas
medicinal
medicinales, y
herbs,
eso es lo que le
on
ayuda a sobrevivir.
agriculture
Ese
practices,
fue
and
muy
this is
curioso
what is
porque
going
el
to help her
trabajo, perdón, que
survive.
fue el fundador,
So it's
uno de
funny
los
because
fundadores me decía,
I
mira,
was talking to
este libro
Kolonek,
que estás
one of the
leyendo
founders,
menciona
and I
Humboldt, y
told him,
sabes
and
que yo
this
leí este libro antes de
book
mudarme
mentions Humboldt,
y me
and
mandó
he said, yeah, I read that book
este
before I moved
artículo
here,
que
and he
la Universidad
sent
donde él
this
enseña
article that
le
was published
hicieron
by the
participar
university
o
where he
promocionar uno de los
teaches,
libros que
and they were just promoting one of the books published by Appropedia that contains different solar energy projects. And it mentioned particularly that he had dreamt of having the library that the protagonist had access to, that it was her dad's library. So this was one of the motivations that is pretty much in line with current needs for data that is being lost. So for 20 years now, we have become this repository that hosts a lot of projects, physical devices, documented, that connect experts with impact, that is, persons that would like to disseminate that knowledge. And so they try to develop sound documentation. In some cases, from the academia, in some cases, it's NGOs, and we have over 100,000 pages, 50,000 files, covering a wide array of topics, including health, water, energy. So, as I said, there is a very broad variety of data and information available in different formats. And catering to that specific need that they may be used for practical purposes, or else that they somehow reflect practices that were common somewhere, like someone built something, and rather than a narrative, it should be based on technical grounds. So it can be a file, it can be a video, it could be some text. So there's different applications for which Appropedia is being used. For instance, the collaborative compendium of medical devices that was developed collaboratively among different students that searched for bibliography in the internet, and they created this small library with some 250 devices. Or there are some university students that are conducting literature review, or they share the content where they are doing academic research. All of this content that supports their research and that may not fit their publication. So they use Appropedia to offer this alternative publication. We also have databases with materials. There's one for sustainable fashion, and there's another one for surgery simulators. We also have maps that are also prepared collaboratively. There are several people that were involved in mapping different stores of sustainable fashion or repair stores, and there were people all across Latin America supporting these efforts. And the last example is Innovation List for Disaster Response. So, as I said, there's a vast variety of different types of information, and our main challenge is to make sense of all of it. And for that, we have good practices in order to help different organizations. They come to us with a challenge, they want to communicate certain information on their projects. So we help them with good practices and standards. And there's also dissemination. How do we get that information out in the open? And so we need to cite Schumacher. What's necessary for that? We need every solution to be cheap, suitable for small scale applications, and compatible with creativity. So the main point of Appropedia's work is to make sure that it's practical, that someone can look at this information, make sense of the information for their own context, and reproduce it. And just a side note, because I have been reading and writing recently on the work of Walter Benjamin, and I was thinking a lot of the work we do that takes the real world and codes it, because our work is strongly focused on coding practices, on understanding people's practices. This is something we did yesterday. We're working with experts that are coding academic documentation on medical simulators. So we took all of that information and we transformed that into an Appropedia entry. in the context of how the world sees data nowadays, most likely a lot of information goes through us and we don't get to make sense of it. That is why I was so interested in Walter Benjamin and particularly on this essay that works about the works of art in the age of mechanical reproduction, because he points out that there is a physical component, that through knowledge and power, we can change the world. We can no longer see it the same way as we take control of the world, as we process it, and there is a political consequence on all of that. So, four main ideas: that it erodes the context. He talks about the aura of the work. Also, that once decontextualized, it may transform material practices. Something that was technology, community ritual, it may become an automated practice. And transforming this reflection into consumption, and it may be liberating and create control. So much of the work we do has to do with coding and processing. For instance, we take files that have been created by others and we make sense of that. And we apply to those files data standards. We validate that they may be reproduced. This is a project that we're currently engaged on. We're testing AI to read a document to tell us what the document is about and how to categorize it, for instance, in terms of technological vocabulary. And one of the proposals that we've developed in that regard has to do with making that information located again, so that the experience of these persons becomes a space for reflection, so that people can say, this idea is useful to me, and I'm going to work on my creativity in order to develop further projects. This is an example of some of the partners that have worked with us. This is a project where we worked on reproducing different devices for simulations so that people all across the world can use them in order to understand where there are no subject matter experts on certain issues, in order to learn in a cheaper and faster way. But there are some physical constraints that are posed not only by data management, but also by the way we publish that data. And also, our platform is being read. We used to have 1 million visits a year, and now that has escalated significantly across different repositories because of AI access. And we have this discussion, this internal debate of how to pave the way for AI to read our information and to make it available, but also doing it responsibly and also aware that we cannot produce real world objects with artificial intelligence. And that takes me to the latest ideas we've had that have to do how we address filing and archiving. We do a lot of work with people that are generating information, and also how we humanize that data. And the work with AI, well, first we try to emancipate ourselves the more we can using local tools and reducing the possibility of our data being used. Practical data cannot be reproduced. They can be mimicked, but not reproduced. And for instance, and lastly, we need to decontextualize responsibly, and that has to do with the dissemination of that knowledge in order to support the people that need to use this information. And we need to facilitate
Entonces,
the
ahí
reproduction of
podemos
that data
necesitar
in the real
información
world. So, as
humana
you can see, there are a lot of
y como solo
mobile
tenía 10
parts, some
minutos,
human, some
no
technical. But
pude,
since I had only 10
digamos,
minutes, I
cómo
cannot further
extenderme porque ya
elaborate
nuestro
on
tiempo
that.
limitó y si
But
tienen
I just wanted
interés, me
to
encantaría platicar
bring
más
it up.
acerca de
And if you're interested, I'd love
qué es
to
lo que
follow the
hacemos nosotros.
conversation with any of you. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias, Emilio, por esta
Thank you so much,
presentación
Emilio, for this
y por
presentation
mantenerte en el tiempo también.
and
Súper
for
interesante.
sticking
Y
to the time.
le
That was
recuerdo
super
a todos y
interesting.
todas quienes
And I would
tengan
like to
preguntas
remind
que las pueden escribir
everyone
por el
that if
chat
you
y
have
vamos a tener un
questions, you can type
momento
them on the
hacia el
chat.
final
And
para
at the
poder
very
hacer
end, we're going to
preguntas.
have a Q&A.
Sin más, me voy a pasar entonces a
Without
nuestra
further
segunda
ado,
oradora,
I'm going to move to our second
Ivonne
speaker of the
Ramírez.
day, Ivonne
Gracias por
Ramírez.
estar aquí con
Yvonne,
nosotras.
thank you very much for joining us
Ivonne
today.
es la subdirectora de desarrollo de
Yvonne is the
proyectos
Deputy Director of
abiertos de
Project
la Dirección de Datos
Development
Abiertos de la Agencia de
at the
Transformación Digital y
Open Data
Telecomunicaciones de México.
Directorate
Es
of
docente de la Universidad
Mexico's Digital
Iberoamericana de la
Transportation
Ciudad
Department.
de
She's a
México
teacher of
y va a
the
estar hablando
Ibero-American
sobre cómo
University in the city of Mexico, and
reestructuraron
she's going
el
to be talking
ecosistema de
about how
publicación de
they've
datos abiertos
restructured
en torno
the
a la
Open Data
Plataforma Nacional
publication
de Datos
ecosystem
Abiertos.
around the national
Ivonne,
platform of
muchísimas
Open
gracias por
Data.
estar aquí.
Yvonne, thank you very much for
Entiendo que te
being
di los
with
permisos
us.
necesarios para que
I
presentes.
understand that you can share
Por
your
favor, si no me lo
slides,
dices.
but if
Adelante.
not, just let me know and please go ahead.
Lo checo ahora y me
Let
dicen
me
si
check it
pueden ver
out
mi pantalla.
and you'll tell me if you can see my slides.
¿Podemos ver tu pantalla? Ahí va.
Yeah, we can see your slides.
Y ahí,
Perfecto.
si pones en presentación de diapositivas, se va a ver toda la pantalla
And
entera.
if you use slideshow, we will see your entire screen.
Ok, va.
Perfecto.
So can you see
Lo que
it?
estamos viendo, Ivonne, es la pantallita de Zoom, nuestras propias caras. Por ahí lo podés minimizar, así se
So
ve
we can actually see
presentación.
our own faces. If you can minimize Zoom, we will see only your presentation.
¿Lo puedo cerrar?
Can I close it?
Sí, con cerrarlo creo que va a estar bien, porque
Yeah,
no te
I
vas
think
a
it's
ir.
okay if you close it.
A
Yep,
ver,
Perfecto.
ustedes me-
there you go.
Sí,
Buenísimo,
sí.
perdón. Muchas
That's great.
gracias por la presentación.
Thank you so
Antes de
much. Thank you
iniciar,
for your
quiero
kind introduction. And before I
agradecer
begin,
muchísimo
I would
a
like
Antonio,
to
a Kat,
thank
secretario,
Antonio, Kat,
que ha
and the
estado
whole team
gestionando
that has
estas
been
necesarias sesiones.
managing
Gracias por
these
considerarlos.
so
Y
necessary
antes de
sessions. Thank you
empezar
very
a
much for
comenzar la estructura
taking
del
these topics into
ecosistema
consideration. And
de
before
publicación de datos abiertos
addressing
en
the
la Plataforma
restructuring of
Nacional
the
de Datos
ecosystem
Abiertos,
of the
quiero
open data
mencionar que
publication
atrás de este
ecosystem
proyecto
in
hay un
the open
equipo
data
no
national
es tan
platform,
numeroso,
I would like to say
pero
that
es un
behind this
equipo de
project, there's
personas
a
que están muy
team that,
comprometidas con
although
el
it's
éxito
not a
de los
large team,
procesos que
it's a team of
llevamos
people that
y en
are strongly
especial
committed to
quiero
every one of the
agradecer
projects
y
we
reconocer el
undertake.
trabajo del
And
doctor
particularly, I
Irving
would like to
Morales, que ha
thank and
coordinado este
recognize the
proyecto ya
work of
casi 2
Dr.
años de
Irving
una
Morales
forma
that has
como,
been coordinating this
como
project for
muy
2 years now
positiva y
in a
muy
very positive manner.
muy buena para el ecosistema.
And
Entonces,
it
voy a
has been great
iniciar.
for the
Cualquier pregunta que
ecosystem.
tengan,
So I'm
agradeceríamos
gonna kick it
de
off, and if
responderlas.
you have any questions, I'll be pleased to
Un poco de
respond.
contexto es
So
que
let me give
esta
you some
reestructura o este
context.
proyecto arranca
This
con el inicio de la
restructuring or
nueva
this project
administración
starts
del gobierno de
with
México, de la doctora
the new
Claudia Sheinbaum.
administration of the government of
Entonces, ella
Mexico, Dr.
designa
Claudia
como
Sheinbaum,
atribuciones de la Agencia de
that
Transformación Digital y Telecomunicaciones
delegated
la
upon
publicación
the
de datos de las instituciones
Agency of Digital
económicas federales.
Transportation of
Entonces,
Telecommunications all
la
powers
Agencia de
related to data
Transformación Digital, a su
governance.
vez,
So the
conforma esta
Digital
Dirección de
Transformation
Datos Abiertos.
Agency is part of this
Y
Open
una
Data
de las primeras
Directorate.
tareas que sabíamos que teníamos
And
que
one of
hacer
the first
es un
tasks
estudio
that we needed to
diagnóstico.
carry out was
Yo
a
soy diseñadora de
diagnosis.
información, soy maestra en diseño de información, entonces
I have a
cuando
master's
recibimos
degree in information
información
design.
hacemos
So based on
estudios
information
diagnósticos que
design,
consideran
we
que
conduct
todas las partes del
diagnoses
sistema, tenemos que
that
analizar
address every
sistémicamente
single part of
los
the system. We
problemas de
have
los
this
proyectos
systemic view
para
of all
identificar
problems in
los
projects in
lugares
order
en
to
donde podemos
identify
incidir en estos sistemas.
where we
Entonces,
can
hacemos los
actually
estudios
make a
diagnósticos,
difference.
vemos el diseño de
So we
información
carried out
y
this
obtenemos como
diagnosis
insights muy
and we
valiosos
obtained very valuable
para
insights
reestructurar este ecosistema, ¿no?
to restructure this
Identificamos que al
ecosystem.
inicio,
We identified
al
that at the
acercarnos
very
al proyecto,
beginning
a
when
la forma en
we
la que se
first
publicaban
approached
datos en el gobierno,
the project and how data was
Encontramos más de
published
una
by the
hora
government,
los
we
gobernanza
found
del dato, donde
that
había muchos
data
actores
was not actually
involucrados,
governed. There were a lot
buscando
of
siempre
stakeholders
la
involved,
mejor
and
comunicación y
they
procesos.
did not always
Entonces,
have the best
eso
possible
finalmente se
communication and
traduce en
processes,
datos que
and
no
that
tienen o no están bajo
ultimately
las mejores
translated into
prácticas
data that are
de
not
publicación
managed according to
y
the best
finalmente
practices
esos
regarding
datos pues no se
publication.
pueden
And
consumir, los
finally, they
usuarios no
cannot
pueden
be used,
acceder a estos datos, entonces eso
they
es
cannot be
finalmente la
accessed,
información no llega al
and
consumidor.
the information
Entonces
does not
después
get to those
de
that
este
need it.
contexto, digamos, los puntos principales que
So the main
identificamos en
points that
estos
we
estudios
identified
diagnósticos es que los objetivos de publicar datos
is that
abiertos
the
no
objectives of
eran
publishing open
principios de
data
transparencia ni de apertura de la información,
did not
sino
follow
más
the
bien
principles of
enfocados a
information
cumplir con su
transparency of
finalidad.
opening. They were just
Entonces,
focused
ahí es
on complying with
importante
the law.
señalar que el objetivo
So
debe de
it
ser
is very
la
important to make
apertura de la
sure that the
información,
objective
la
should always
transparencia
be to
institucional,
open up data, to
y eso
have
debe comunicarse
institutional
a los
transparency,
usuarios,
and
a los
that needs to
consumidores de
be
los datos.
communicated to data users
Consideramos
and
también que
consumers.
los datos que
So we
publica la
also consider
institución deben
that the
hablar de las
data
actividades
published by
sustantivas
the
que
institution
hace
need to
y deben estar, por supuesto, dirigidos
disseminate
a
the
un
actions
público
carried out by the
especializado,
organization, and
como
they
los
need to be
analistas,
addressed to
periodistas de opinión
specialized
y demás,
audience
pero
like
también
analysts
consideramos que un
and
público objetivo muy
others,
importante
but
del
we
consumo
also
de
believe
datos
that a very
es
important target
son aquellas
audience of
personas que
this
no
data are those people
necesariamente saben
that
cómo analizar
do not
los datos.
necessarily
Entonces,
know
consideramos que, por
how to
supuesto, que los
analyze
datos
this
tienen que
data.
ser consumibles en
So
formatos y en formas
we
de consumo.
believe
Aquí
that
me gusta
they need
decir
to
que los datos
be
tienen que
suitable
traducirse
for
en
any form of
información
consumption. We like to
para
say
que
that
lleguen a
data
más
needs to
personas.
be translatable into
El tercer
information so that
punto
they
es
get to more
que
people.
debe de haber, es muy
And the
importante que haya un
third point
conjunto de
is that
materiales,
it's very
de
important to have a
insumos
set
para
of
aquellos actores que
materials
generan los datos,
for those
donde
that
se
create
puedan
data
formar constantemente sobre
so
las mejores
that
prácticas
they can
de
be constantly
la
trained
generación de los datos
on
y
best
que
data
todos vayan
generation
orientados a
practices,
fomentar estos objetivos de
and they
comunicación,
should all be
¿no? Cuando
focused
decimos
on
materiales, hablamos de procesos bien
these
diseñados,
communication
con unos controles y
objectives.
temporalidades claras, leyes, estándares, manuales y capacitación
So,
para estos actores.
these include
Y otro
standard
punto
laws and
importante
handbooks.
es justo lo que les mencionaba, transformar los datos
And
en
so,
información
what I said
y
was
que
this
sea como más amplia
transforming
la forma en la
data into
que estos datos se
information,
comunican o se transmiten a los consumidores de datos. En
and they
suma,
can
pues es
only
tener una
be
visión sistémica de este
transferred to
proceso
data
de publicación.
consumers.
No es únicamente una
So, this
plataforma,
systemic vision
sino
is not
hay
only a
procesos
platform, but there are
atrás
also
de este proyecto y que
processes
cada
behind
actor
this
lo cumple
project.
con lo que
And
debe cuando
if
debe
every
cumplir, pues el
actor,
proceso se va
if they do
rompiendo poco a
not
poco.
comply with
Entonces
what
es
they
muy
need to comply,
importante
the
tener esta
process will
visión
be
sistémica.
broken. That is why it's so important to have this systemic vision.
Las partes que componen este
The
ecosistema de
parts that
publicación
make
de
up
datos abiertos
these
son tres
open data
categorías muy
ecosystems are the
generales
three very general or
del
high-level
ecosistema.
categories.
Tenemos actores, tenemos
There are
documentación y
stakeholders, there's
herramientas.
documentation, and
Los
tools.
actores, por ejemplo, ahí nos
The
encontramos los
stakeholders
coordinadores, los que llevamos a cabo
include the
toda la gestión
coordinators,
de los
those that are
procesos
in
y
charge
de
of
la
managing
plataforma.
processes and the platform.
Tenemos a los generadores de datos, que son
There's
aquellas
also data
instituciones que
generators
justo
that are those
sus áreas se
institutions
encargan como de generar, recopilar,
that have
generar estas
areas
bases
in
de
charge
datos
of
y los consumidores de
gathering
datos
and
en dos
creating these
niveles, como son
databases,
niveles que les
and
explicaba
data
hace un momento.
consumers into
En
to
términos de
different
documentación
levels
o
that I
documentos,
mentioned
tenemos actos
earlier. In terms
normativos, que
of
son leyes
documents,
y
we have
reglamentos
regulatory
que obligan a las
documents that
instituciones de alguna
include
forma
laws
a
and
publicar
guidance that
datos.
somehow force
Tenemos también
institutions to publish
estándares
certain
de
data.
calidad en
We
términos de
also
datos
have
abiertos,
quality
nacionales e
standards,
internacionales. Y
both
tenemos
national and
documentos que refieren a
international,
la
and we also
planeación de la
have
publicación.
documents that
Con
refer
esto nos
to
referimos a
publication
catálogos de
planning.
datos, a planes
And by
anuales de
this, we mean
publicación. Y
annual
todo esto
publication
nos ayuda
plans,
justo a
and
guiar los
everything
procesos con las
helps us
instituciones.
guide
Ellos
the
también sean
processes with the different
responsables y tengan
institutions
control como
that to have them be responsible
de su
and to have
publicación anual.
control
También
of
aquí es
these
importante
annual
decir que todo el
publications.
tiempo estamos trabajando
So
constantemente
in
con
this
las
case,
instituciones
it's
para
important to say that we're constantly
fomentar
working with institutions in
o
order to
ayudar
foster
a que identifiquen nuevos
or
datos,
help them
haya como
identify
más
new data
oferta de datos
so
que
that
hacen sobre
there's greater
diferentes procesos
availability of data
tenemos en la
working on
plataforma
institutions
nacional.
that are available at the
Y
national
finalmente,
platform.
otra parte muy importante
And
del
finally, another very
ecosistema son las
important element of the
herramientas,
ecosystem
herramientas que
are
hemos
tools.
diseñado y desarrollado desde la
Tools that
Dirección de
we
Datos
have
Abiertos
designed and
para
developed
procesar y
at the
limpiar
Open
datos bajo los
Data
mejores criterios
Directorate in order to
de
process
calidad
and
de
clean
base
up
de
data
datos,
subject
para
to
publicar y
the
visualizar datos, y en
highest
este caso
data
la herramienta
quality
para esto es la
criteria.
Plataforma Nacional de
And
Datos Abiertos.
the tool
Y
we're
una
using for
parte muy
this is
importante
the
del
Open Data
proceso que
National
es
Platform.
meramente interna
And
es para gestionar la información.
this
Es
is also
una
used to
herramienta que
manage
también se diseñó y
information.
se
This is a
desarrolló
tool that
dentro
was
de la
also
Dirección de
designed
Datos
and
Abiertos,
developed
y
within
esta
the
herramienta nos sirve
Open
para
Data Directorate,
gestionar,
and it's
tener
used to
actualizaciones,
manage, to have
tener el control
updates,
de la vinculación,
to have
para gestionar
control
básicamente la información de
over
300 instituciones de la
the
Administración
connections,
Pública
to
Federal.
manage the
Entonces,
information of all the
es
different
también
agencies
una
that are
parte muy
part of the
importante del
federal
proceso.
government. And that is why it's such
Y
an
todo esto
important
se
part
ve,
of the
todas estas
process.
partes del
And
ecosistema,
all
todas
of
nuestras
these
herramientas se ven
parts
mezclados o se ven vinculados en el diseño de
are
los procesos
related
de publicación, de
as
los
part of
cuales
the
vamos a
publication
hablar
processes,
un
of
poquito
which
ahora.
we are gonna be
Quiero
talking
decirles que
now.
esto está súper sintetizado porque
Let
de
me
verdad
tell
el
you
proceso es
that
como,
this is super
tenemos el
simple
diseño como muy puntual,
because we have a
muy
very
específico
specific
con
design
temporalidades y demás, pero bueno, aquí traté de
with different
destacar
timing and
en
everything,
pasos como muy
but
concretos,
I
¿no?
try to
El primer
simplify it in
paso,
very
por
specific
supuesto, es hacer la
steps. The
vinculación
first steps,
institucional,
of course,
y se
is
dan
the
cuenta en estos tres grandes pasos
institutional
vienen
connection. If you check it
iniciados con
out,
capacitaciones muy importantes para los actores
they
institucionales,
start with
porque no
very
todos
important
tenemos el
training
mismo
because not
acceso o
all of
conocimiento
them
sobre qué son los
have the
datos y
same
después
knowledge
qué hace que esos
threshold
datos
of
sean
the
abiertos.
data and what makes
Entonces,
that data
es
open.
muy importante como esta sección o estas
So
capacitaciones
it is
hacia los
very
actores.
important
Entonces,
for
empezamos
that
con
to
la
be used
vinculación
across different
institucional,
areas.
tenemos una
So we
primera
started
capacitación
with
cómo funciona
institutional
todo
connections.
desde
We
la
have a
dirección de
first
publicación
training, that is how the
hacia la
whole
plataforma.
Open
Después,
data
las
publication
instituciones
system
tienen que
works on the
designar
platform. Then
actores que
institutions need
coordinen
to
la publicación
appoint
de datos y la calidad de esa
coordinators
publicación.
to
Lo
manage the
segundo es
publication
que
of data from the
ayudamos
institution.
hacemos como
And
un trabajo de selección de información.
finally, we
Aquí nos apoyamos
select
mucho
the
en estándares
information
internacionales, lo que
and we
dice que son los datos
follow
mínimos por
international
sector, y
standards that
también
establish the minimum data per
pues las
sector
características de las actividades que hace la institución.
and also
Y
the
aquí sale pues el
characteristics
catálogo de datos y el plan de
of
publicación
the
de datos
institution.
abiertos de cada institución. Y también
And
empezamos esta parte después de
we
seleccionar la
also
información con la
started this
estructuración
after
de la base de
selecting
datos y
the
su contexto.
information,
Muy
structuring the
importante que los
databases
datos
and
estén
their
estructurados
context.
bajo los
It is extremely
criterios de
important
publicación y que tengan,
to
por
have
supuesto,
data
el
structured
contexto
based on publication
suficiente.
criteria
Lo segundo que
and to
tiene
have
que
the
ver con la
necessary
publicación y
context.
visualización, se hace un registro
Second,
en este sistema de información de la Dirección de Datos Abiertos
there is
y
a
después se
record
pasa a la
in the
configuración de
information
los
system
datos
of the
y
Open
su
Data
contexto
Directorate,
y
and then we
después se
share
visualiza. Aquí muy
the
importante
data
solo
settings
retomar
and
la
context,
parte
and
de que
then they can be
es
viewed.
fundamental
And it's very
poder
important
acercar
to
los
highlight that
datos no
it's
solo
essential
a aquellas
to
personas que saben
take the
procesar la información,
data
un poco de
not
lo que
only to
hablaban
those that
en
can
la
process
intervención
it,
pasada, ¿no? ¿Quién es el actor que consume esos
but
datos y
also
cómo
to the
podemos
actors that are
acercar? ¿Cuáles son
consuming
las
them
formas de
and
consumo
how
que
we can
podemos
approach them,
acercar para que los use más
how we
población?
can
Entonces
get that
aquí
data to more
tenemos
people
la
so
parte de
that
la
they can actually
configuración de la
use them.
visualización, que es una herramienta que ayuda
So
o que pretende ayudar a
this is
interpretar
a
estos
tool
datos para
that
nuestros
seeks
consumidores
to
que
help
no son expertos en
interpret
análisis.
the data, particularly for users that are not experts
Finalmente,
in analyzing
muy
data.
importante hacer un seguimiento en términos de
Finally,
actualización de
it's
los
very
datos y su
important to
contexto.
update the
Aquí es
data and its
fundamental
context.
el papel que tiene el sistema de información desarrollado por la dirección,
It is key to
aunque
take into
también las
consideration the
instituciones
information
tienen que
system
tener
developed
bajo
by the
control
Directorate, although
su plan de
institutions need to have
publicación
control
y dar
of their own
seguimiento
publications and
a
they
las
need to be able
actualizaciones de sus
to
datos.
follow up the different
Aquí rápidamente quiero
updates
enseñarles
of
la
their data.
plataforma,
Very
invitarlas,
quickly,
invitarlos a que la
I would
visiten.
like to invite you
Tenemos estas
to
grandes
use
secciones,
the
tenemos
platform.
algunas
There are these large
visualizaciones, las bases de
sections.
datos,
There are some views, categories per institution, and we would like to invite you to explore it. If you have any questions or anything, it will be a pleasure to hear you. And we are going to be extremely happy if you can explore the data and the categories. I'm going to move a little bit faster. Finally,
Bueno, en términos de aprendizajes, lo que
in
podemos
terms
decir
of
es que,
learning,
desde nuestro punto de vista, el camino hacia la gobernanza de datos empieza
the path
justo
to
porque debe
data
estar
governance, in our
pública
view,
desde el
starts
proceso de
with this
publicación.
systemic view of the
Como ya
publication
mencionaba, se tiene
process.
que trabajar con
As
un
I
objetivo
mentioned
en
earlier,
común
we need to
a
work with a
la
common
publicación
goal
de datos que
when we
obedezca
publish
justo a la
data,
transparencia
and that
institucional
needs
y a
to
la
be in
apertura de
line with
información.
data transparency and information opening.
Este tema de hacer legible al Estado,
making it
consideramos que es un primer
readable
paso
for
para
the
la
state, we
rendición de
consider
cuentas y
that
presupuestos
to be a
responsables para la
first
corrupción.
step for
Retomamos también los
accountability,
principios
and we
de la
also
Carta
resume the
de
different
Datos
principles
Abiertos, de la
of the
cual
Open Data
México es
Charter,
miembro desde
of which
2015,
Mexico has been a
y
member
consideramos, por
since
supuesto, que los
2015.
datos generados
And
por
of course, we
instituciones
consider that the
públicas pues son
data
públicos
created
por
by
defecto,
public
porque
institutions are
son
public
generados
by
con recursos
default,
públicos.
because they are
Después, por
created
supuesto, se
with
reservará
public
aquellos puntos
resources. Of course, there's going to be some
sea suscepto
reserved
de reservarse,
information
pero
when
la
it needs to be
publicación de datos
preserved,
abiertos
but the
tiene
publication of
que
open
cumplir con este
data
derecho de acceso a la información.
needs
Y,
to
por supuesto, para
respect
satisfacerlo
the
de
right to
forma
access to
completa,
information,
hay que
and of
publicar los
course,
datos bajo las mejores
to
prácticas.
comply with this principle, we
Procesos de
need to
revisión
publish data
continua.
based on the best
Es
practices.
fundamental que se revisen términos de
Continuous
datos y de
review
plataformas en todo el sistema.
processes needs are essential across the whole system.
Fomentar que la publicación de datos sea un punto de encuentro
We need to
entre el
make
Estado y
sure
la
that
población,
data
que
publication
fomente
is the
también la
meeting point between
participación
the
en
population and the state,
instituciones
also
administrativas.
promoting the participation in
Y
administrative
finalmente,
decisions. And
consideramos que no hay
finally,
un único y correcto
we
proceso
consider
para
that
publicar
there's not
datos.
a single
Sin
correct
embargo,
process for
utilizar
publishing
métodos
data. However,
de análisis, de diagnósticos
using
de datos de
analysis and
información
diagnosis
para
data
mapear
that
y
are based
visualizar las particularidades
on
de cada
information design in
sistema
order to map
puede
the
ayudar a abordar el reto
characteristics of
desde
each
una forma
system
más
may
integrada
help
y más
address
exitosa.
this challenge
Muchas
more
gracias a
successfully.
todas y a todos y
Thank you
estaré
very much to
feliz
every one
de
of you,
contestar
and
sus
I'm going to
preguntas.
be available for anything you need.
Muchísimas gracias, Ivonne. La verdad
Thank you
que
so much, Ivonne. The
conocer una
truth
experiencia en
is
transición de administraciones siempre
that
es un desafío
getting
para
to
las
know this
políticas de datos
experience that
abiertos,
comes from
entonces
the
entender
government
el
is always the
trabajo que
challenge.
vienen
So
haciendo, que están haciendo y que van a
understanding the
seguir
work that
haciendo
you've been doing
es una
and that you are
experiencia
going to
importante
continue
para nuestra
doing, that is a
comunidad,
very important
porque aún
experience
después de
for
muchos
our
años de
community.
políticas de datos
Because
abiertos,
even after
esos
many
momentos
years of
siguen
open
siendo un
data
desafío.
policies,
Entonces, felicitaciones por el
these
trabajo hecho y,
projects are
y
still a
nada,
challenge.
quedamos igual abiertos a
Congratulations for the
preguntas
work you've done.
luego
And of course, we are
de
here
que
if anyone
pasemos a
has
nuestro tercer
questions
orador. Te agradezco
after we
muchísimo,
hear our
Ivonne.
third speaker of the day. Thank you once again, Yvonne.
Para no sacarle tiempo a la
We
sesión,
don't
voy
want
a
to
pasar
steal any
entonces.
time
I'm
from the
gonna
session,
switch
and
to
I'm
English to introduce our final speaker. Tommy Charles is the National Coordinator of OpenStreetMaps in Sierra Leone. Tommy, I have to give you the permissions to share your screen. There you go. Tommy, if you want to please put up your camera and please take over the presentation. This is your time to introduce the amazing work that you do.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I'd love to keep my camera on, but my internet is not so stable.
No problem. Thank you so much for being here.
Okay, thanks for having me also. Okay. Are you seeing my screen? Please confirm if you're seeing my screen.
Yes.
Are you seeing my screen? Please confirm.
Yes, now we can see it perfectly. It's all spread out.
Okay, I am Tommy Charles. I serve as the national coordinator of the local OpenStreetMap community here in Sierra Leone. The community is a community-led mapping initiative And an overview of OpenStreetMap Sierra Leone, which is a registered community-based organization here in Sierra Leone. It coordinates Youth Mappers activities. The Youth Mappers is a network of tertiary students in tertiary institutions that come together to establish knowledge learning and sharing platform, especially with the use and creation of geospatial data, mainly within the OpenStreetMap ecosystem. OSM Sierra Leone also facilitates open mapping training and other activities within Sierra Leone. We also implement community-led projects that mainly make use of geospatial data and information. So, like I said, we coordinate Youth Mappers activities wherein we establish Youth Mappers chapters. Currently, we have 5 established Youth Mappers chapters here in Sierra Leone, and we are pushing for the establishment of more within tertiary institutions across the country. So once we establish these Youth Mappers chapters, we capacitate them with geospatial skills in order for them to be able to map their communities, and also with some data analytics and geographic information system techniques and skills. And also we provide mentorship for them, because once they are part of the Youth Mappers chapter, we mentor them in terms of their career path and also how they can excel in their studies. We implement community-led projects. Over the years, we've implemented a series of projects that I'll be speaking on in the subsequent slides. And few of them are the power grid mapping. We've implemented microgrants, the Mwalai, the Open Mapping Advocacy Network project, the Freetown Drone Mapping project, and the Freetown Central Business District Regeneration project. I'll touch on each of these projects in the jiffy. So the power grid mapping basically was focused on the mapping of utility poles. We went across the country using ground level images that were uploaded to different platforms, wherein those platforms automatically mapped out the utility poles within those images, and that information was used by power provider, energy providers, and in terms of planning their mini grids within selected communities across the country. This basically enhanced access to energy or access to electricity across the country. We are also doing, because of this project, we also capacitated youth mappers. We trained them on how to collect ground level images and also how to validate images that had utility poles. And also it improved inclusion, because whilst we are implementing this project, we worked directly with community stakeholders and also students that we are living within those communities. We implemented the Mwalai grant, which was to establish relationship with local institutions and understand their data needs. A lot of institutions here in Sierra Leone have needs for geospatial data, but they don't know how to go about it, how to collect these data, analyze them, and also make use of them. So that is why we took part in the Mwalai micro grants to establish relationship with these local institutions. Once we established the relationship, we capacitated their core members with emerging open mapping techniques. This included things like Kobo Toolbox, OpenStreetMap, the Java OpenStreetMap, the ODK. We introduced them to this. And also, we collected drone images within 3 informal settlements. We aimed to map 1,000 buildings and roads within selected slums, and also mapped 500 points of interest within these selected slums. That was the Open Mapping Advocacy Network, and the goal was to introduce 400 individuals to OpenStreetMap. In order to achieve this, we conducted training across the country, and these trainings included mapathons and cattle parties, wherein we came together, selected a specific community within a district, and then we mapped together. And also there were some field mapping, wherein we selected a specific community. We went out there and mapped out all the points of interest within those communities. And as part of the sustainability strategy was that we encouraged individuals to become part of the OpenStreetMap Sierra Leone community or Youth Mappers network within their universities. And we We implemented the Freetown drone mapping when we created approximately 82 kilometers square of drone imagery of the entire Freetown city. And this drone imagery was created or generated through community pilots and image processors, wherein we went to informal settlements, conducted series of training, and earmarked individuals that were tech savvy that could pilot drones and also use their Android phones efficiently. And then they went out and collected images, and those images were stitched for us to have aerial imagery of the entire city. So as part of our, excuse me, as part of our sustainability strategy, we are trying to develop a drone mapping ecosystem wherein people can be able to fly drones and also create high resolution images that could be posted on a platform called OpenStreetMap that development practitioners, the city council can make use of for planning and also for disaster response. We've been facilitating open mapping training and events. We've conducted armchair mapping where people come together in a certain location with access to internet, computers, and screens that they can map places remotely using the OpenStreetMap platform. And of course, we've been conducting field mapping data collection where we give people phones, 360 cameras, and then they go out, they capture images. These images are then used to develop geospatial tools and geospatial data that gives people insights about their communities. And of course, we as a geospatial community, we conduct GIS and data analysis and also remote sensing analysis to understand certain patterns and trends. We also conduct summits and seminars. So we've been conducting the Youth Mappers Summit, the Sierra Leone chapter, wherein youth mappers across the country come together and then they share ideas, they share the things they've been doing and the potential rooms for improvement. We've also been conducting what we call the Sierra Leone Joe Connect, which is a gathering that invites institutions across the country that make use of geospatial data. They showcase their projects, what they've been doing, and how students and other geospatial practitioners can participate. At this junction, I'd like to stop and say thanks for your attention. We are OpenStreetMap Sierra Leone, and I'm also Godfrey Tom Charles. You can get in touch with us through these email addresses. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tommy, and thanks for the amazing work that every chapter of OpenStreetMap actually does worldwide. So thank you so much for being here and sharing your work. We do have some questions in the chat, so I want to open them to any of the speakers. I think Ivonne is more targeted into this, but I think Emilio and Tommy can have also a comment on this. So they're asking about licenses. ¿Hay alguna licencia en particular para los datos que sean recomendados para los publicadores?
Is there any particular license for data recommended
Es la
to
primera pregunta.
publishers?
Nosotros
That is
también
one of the
podemos
questions.
ayudar desde Open Data Charter, pero quiero
So
que
we can
hablen
help
los
from
oradores.
Open Data Charter, but I would like to hear from the
En la
speakers.
Plataforma Nacional de Datos
In the
Abiertos,
National Open Data
publicamos bajo la
Platform, we
licencia
publish
Creative
under
Commons
the
Attribution,
license of
la
Creative
4.0.
Commons Attribution
Tenemos todo un
4.0,
manual que obedece a
and
criterios
there's a
nacionales e
whole
internacionales para la
handbook
publicación
that
de mejores prácticas
collects
de
all
datos,
domestic and
en
international
cuanto esté
standards
público,
on data publishing,
compartirlo con
and
todos ustedes.
as long as as soon as it's published, we will be in a position to share it with you.
Y no sé, responderé la segunda pregunta de una vez.
And let me
¿Cuál
respond
es
to the
el
second question.
procedimiento
What
para que
is
una
the
institución
procedure
público-privada tenga espacio u oportunidad de
for
publicar
a
en la
public-private
Plataforma Nacional de
organization
Datos
to have
Abiertos?
the
Bueno, las
possibility of publishing
instituciones
in the National
de
Open
la
Data
Administración
Platform?
Pública Federal
The
tienen que publicar
federal
todos los
agencies
datos que
need to
están en
publish
la
data.
plataforma. Si una institución que no es miembro
If
de la
an institution or agency that is not part of the federal administration wants to publish data, the only possibility is to sign an agreement. And I can share it with you. I can share my email. There are several institutions that have published in this way, and we are just about to launch the platform code so that every agency that wants to have their own platform can use this code with their own handbooks, of course, and necessary documentation, so that they can actually publish data in that way. So if that's okay, I can share my email so that I can share more about that procedure with you.
Muchas gracias, Ivonne. Tommy,
Thank you,
Emilio,
Ivonne.
any comments on these two questions?
¿Y puedo seguir, si les parece?
Adelante.
Con respecto a
Yeah,
licencias,
I can continue. In terms of licenses, since much of the work we do has to do with physical devices, in addition to documentation licenses, we also recommend CC by SA, Creative Commons, and there's a whole family of licenses for hardware as well. And the reason for that is that the characteristic of these physical devices require certain attributions that have to do with patents. It's not exactly a patent, but it's quite close. So that said, the more it gets opened, when we're talking about design or documentation, the more we know that incremental innovation will become the state of the art. So in many cases, we know that for a country with fewer advantages, it's best to share and prevent others from patenting something than trying to share a patent with others. And as for the second question, we work with other data platforms because we produce data based on documentation, and how that documentation is going to be uploaded to the platform. And after that, we do some collaborative curation in certain cases with organizations that can transform the data into readable data. And we use it for interactive platforms or also to allow portability. That means that someone can take the whole data platform.
Muchísimas
Thank you
gracias.
so much.
Tommy, any comments on licenses and like I would guess also citizen generated data and how if you're using any type of licenses to work with OpenStreetMap collective data generation.
We mostly use the Creative Commons license because these are citizen generated data we send to OpenStreetMap, and also doing drone mapping activities. We publish our drone images to OpenStreetMap, which also use the same Creative Commons license. But however, when we work with certain institutions that we collect sensitive information about the work they do, their locations and all, we don't publish these because they are to some extent proprietary. So it's left residents with the institutions. However, some institutions might feel free to release the data for public use, for social good. So they also release this data on a Creative Commons license.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I was thinking that maybe we can invite for one of our other sessions of the implementation working group, somebody from Creative Commons to give a deeper explanation of the licensing system that they've created. Diogo, I see you have your hand up. Please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Just a moment that I was going to write it. So it's easier also to see. Okay, so following on, can you hear me? You can hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Following on Emilio, what he was saying on that open data somehow can contribute to equality, no, or to fight inequality. And if any of those three could develop a little bit more on how open data maps or open knowledge on sustainability or open digital transformation in the case of Mexico, how can contribute to a more equal world and communities and somehow fight inequality that is such a problem and it seems that is rising again in the world. Thank you. En castellano o en inglés. No sé si debo hacer la pregunta en castellano también.
Tenemos
In English
traducción
or
instantánea,
Spanish?
así
Should
que da
I
igual.
also answer in English? No, we have a simultaneous interpretation.
Yo creo que el
Well,
gran
if I
reto es
may,
hacer que todas
I
estas
believe that the
plataformas
biggest
sean
challenge
usadas,
is to make sure that every one
que
of these
solamente se
platforms is
conviertan en
actually
una
used
colección que la
so that
gente
they are not
descarga
just a
y
collection
que
that people download
no hay una acción social. O sea, la
with
razón por
no
la que
social
existen
action. The
políticas, o
reason
sea, que las políticas de datos abiertos
why
han llegado a nivel de
open data
gobierno,
policies
tiene una
have
razón
come
detrás,
to
igual
government
que la sociedad civil
level, have a
trabajamos
reason behind it, just like
por
civil
democratizar el
society.
acceso
We
a
work on
información,
democratizing
tiene que
access
tener
to
una razón de fondo, si
information.
no solo se
We
vuelve
need to have a
un
reason for
hobby de
that because
colección.
otherwise
Entonces,
it becomes
creo que lo
nothing
importante
but
es
a hobby.
poner al frente
That
una
is why I
propuesta
believe it's
en la que qué
important
esperamos a las personas que hagan. Por ejemplo, en el caso de
to
gobiernos es
see
hacer que
what
los
we
gobiernos
expect
den
from people. For instance,
recomendaciones
in the case
fuertes
of
sobre las acciones
governments,
para
we need to
validar lo que
hold
se
them
está
accountable
haciendo
so that
a
people can
todos los
actually
niveles.
validate
En
what's
el caso
going
de
on at
sociedad
every
civil,
single
igual
level. In the case of
hacer que
civil
las
society,
organizaciones que
just
están
like
en el
that,
lucro
we need
realmente
to make sure
utilicen
that
todo de forma
organizations
responsable,
and
que no sean extractivistas,
nonprofits
que no
use
se lleguen
funds
a tomar
responsibly,
datos
that
para
they are
ponerlos en
not
una plataforma, sino
extractivists,
que
that they don't
generen un
just
impacto.
take data to put them on a platform and actually create an
Justamente por
impact.
eso mencionaba que es bien importante para nosotros pensar en cómo las
And that
personas
is why I mentioned that
que
it's
utilizan
important for
nuestras
us to
plataformas
think how
toman esos
people that
datos y hacen
use this
sentido de que
platform
les
take
inspire
that data
para
and make
crear una
sense of it,
solución o que
that they are
aprenden una
inspired to create a
habilidad.
solution.
Entonces es un reto difícil que a veces va más allá de la
And
plataforma y por eso es tan
sometimes it goes
importante
beyond
buscar
the platform,
alianzas
and
y
that is
hacer trabajo
why
de campo.
it's so necessary to work on these partnerships in the field.
Gracias, Emilio. Gracias, Diego. Perdón, quería
Thank you very
seguir con
much,
una
Emilio and
pregunta.
Diogo. I just wanted
Sí, ya me quedé un
to do a
poco
follow-up
ahí.
question.
Sí, justo, gracias. Coincido totalmente con
Yes,
lo que
I
dice
completely
Emilio,
agree with what
que
Emilio was
pues en la
saying.
formación de diseñadora de información es muy
As
importante
an information
también
design
identificar
specialist, for me, it's
el
extremely
usuario o
important
hacia quién
to
estamos
identify the
dirigiendo esa
user
información para que realmente pueda usarla, ¿no?
so
Y
that it can
hacer lo que,
truly
lo que el
be
consumidor de
used
los datos
to do what
requiera de
data
los datos.
users
En
require.
realidad el papel desde la
And
institución, desde el gobierno federal, pues es disponer la
the
información
role of the federal government
en los
is to make
mejores
this information
formatos
available in the best possible
para que pueda ser
format
consumida por diferentes tipos
so that it
de
can
perfiles.
be
Por eso el
used
esfuerzo
by
de tener
different
el
profiles. That is
visualizador de
why
datos en la
we have
plataforma,
this data
porque eso
view
apunta
in the
hacia otro
platform
tipo de
because
usuario, de consumidor de datos y que pueda
that targets
tomar
other
las decisiones
users
que basadas en datos, ¿no? Eso es como uno de
and
los
can
grandes
help
objetivos.
them make
Entonces,
data-based
también
decisions.
una cosa importante que hemos comentado mucho en la
So
dirección es que
something else that
en
we have
medida de lo
discussed
posible
extensively
está bien que
in
se
our
tenga un puente
directorate is that as long as it's possible, it's great to have a bridge between the one creating the data and the data user. Sometimes is the one that creates the data that launches a product, but sometimes we need to give the possibility to our citizens to say, I don't want this translation, I don't want this interpretation, how can I access this data? And how do we do in order to apply the best possible criteria to our data?
Muchas gracias.
In our case, in order to enhance inclusion, so for instance, we noticed that informal settlements are probably the most affected communities when it comes to climate vulnerability and disaster and all. But unfortunately, most of the time they've been left out in creating their own data that government or non-governmental organizations use to address their issues. So what we are doing now is we are going directly to these informal settlements where we train the community members to do data collection, to serve as enumerators, to serve as drone pilots, to serve as data interpreters within their communities. So they actually provide the data, they actually help us help institutions to understand their needs better. So that is how we contribute to the inclusion aspect, because many a times when, let's say, there is a disaster within a specific informal settlement, you have people coming from formal settlements, some from even affluent communities going down there, trying to understand what they are going through. And then sometimes the picture that they create can be biased and cannot be as informative as if as someone who will give it, or someone that lives within the community will provide such information. As it, let's say, in terms of road accessibility, in terms of climate adaptation measures, such as the materials that they use to build their homes, why they chose those materials, their financial situation. So people within informal settlements provide more credible information. So that is why we've been training them on how to conduct digital data collection initiatives and all. So that's what we've been doing so far as it relates to inclusion and providing correct data for informed decision making.
Thank
Thank you so
Tommy.
much. Thank you so much to the three speakers. Actually, we only have 2 minutes left, so I'm going to wrap it up here. We had some really great input and really different perspectives and experiences, and that's part of what the Open Data Charter tries to do with these calls, to bring in different actors from different contexts, even different continents, and share different experiences so we can all learn from each other. And move the agenda forward. Once again, gracias Ivonne, gracias Emilio, thank you Tommy for being here. And I'm going to leave with one note to everybody. We're not going to have an implementation working group call in August, but we will be back in September. So please wait for us. We will be talking about AI, which is one of the main digital topics, if you want. But please wait for our comms and our new line of speakers. Thank you again, everybody who joined. Gracias a todos. Muy buenas tardes. Good evening,
Thank
everybody.
you, everyone.
Muchas gracias.
Bye. Have a nice day.